session is being recorded. Thank you. The session is being recorded so that everyone has an opportunity to hear the answers to their questions and also be able to recall some of the things that we discuss here, any resources, etc. Okay, so with that said, ladies, are you ready to get this party started?
Ready.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, I gave sort of a very high level introduction to who you are, but I'd love to know in your own words, who are you? What was your journey like to get here? And I'll ask a compound question, which is, how would you describe your career in 3 words? Let's begin with Danielle.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much, Shanice, for the very complimentary introduction. I really appreciate it. I myself am an alum of NYU SCPS, so I'm super excited specifically, to be here and to pay forward the amazing education I got there and to connect with all of you. So a little bit about me, I started in recruitment over 10 years ago in the media space and very quickly transitioned into HR business partner, talent acquisition, dual roles. And it was something that just kind of came my way naturally and wasn't something that I was really thinking that I wanted to do for the rest of my career. I really felt like talent acquisition could be that thing, but I fell in love with it and have been managing talent acquisition and HR teams for over 10 years. And I've been at Fleischman Hillard for about 2.5 months now, but it has been quite an interesting ride given our current, context and environment that we're all living in. And I feel like I have joined a family that has really welcomed me with open arms, and I'm very grateful to be a part of that. And so for me, I would say 3 words I would use to describe my journey would probably be roller coaster, which I'll probably talk to you guys, explain that one a little bit more as we head into these discussions. But I would say roller coaster, connection, and growth.
Those are very good words. And roller coaster, I think from the head nodding, I think Carmela and Regina and I would definitely agree with you. Okay, let's go with Carmela.
Okay, so hi everyone. It is nice to be here tonight, and thank you, Shanice, for the wonderful introduction as well, and thank you for inviting me to be here. My career actually started in the beauty sector. I have a background in engineering and chemical engineering. So it's completely untraditional for an engineer to transition into communications. But as I progressed, I spent about 10 years doing engineering work for different skincare and pharmaceutical companies. And transitioning into communications came from just the natural being a scientist and needing to explain things to folks who weren't scientists, having an interest in that. And I also pursued my my MS in public relations and corporate communications at NYU at the SPS program. So that's how I got here at the PRSA Foundation, where I've been for almost a year now. And excited to be here. The 3 words I would say would describe my career are, my career path or my career journey are unorthodox, risky, and networking.
Okay, those are good. Okay. All right, Regina, the pressure's on.
Well, thanks everybody.
I was gonna say, we gotta get some really good words here, so.
Oh my gosh, so much pressure. Well, thanks for inviting me to this, and I'm really glad to be here. At first, I have to say kudos to your entire team for making this such an amazing virtual event. I mean, not even one tiny glitch so far. So kudos to you and your servers, I guess. So career-wise, I would say, I mean, my background is pretty equally split between executive search and corporate recruiting functions. I think the biggest theme throughout my career is I've always been drawn to either opportunities that were complete builds from the ground up. You know, the function doesn't exist in the corporation, you have to build it, and then you have to hire X number of people in this time frame. Just go do that. Or working with entrepreneurs at startups to help them build out their critical, you know, management teams, their first sales organization, whatever it is. So been kind of in and around things related to emerging technologies for a very long time. 3 words to describe my career to date, I would say a phrase, no blueprint, probably, because I've always walked in with no one giving me any kind of direction on what to do, just kind of figure it out as you go. And then I would say the third important word is relationships.
Okay. So I see a theme here, that there's no, you know, the phrase or the cliche is that the quickest way from point A to point B is a straight line. But we know that the real truth is it might be the quickest way, but it might not be the most effective way, right? I think that we can all agree that sort of going in unorthodox ways, you know, getting to your career at this point in unorthodox ways, sorry, first day with the new tongue, really gives you experiences that you really can't learn from a book or from class or, you know, if someone tells you. So my question to you, before I open up to the audience is, you know, is it overrated to go straight through school right into your career path? And anyone can answer.
Go ahead, Carmela. You gasped first.
So I would say it's really up to you. I mean, I can speak from personal experience and say that I went to work right after school, right after undergrad. And that's actually how I came to find out that what I wanted to do, just experiencing different things, not saying no to anything someone asked me to do, especially if it got me an opportunity to work with a function outside of my own. So whether it was working with the finance team or the procurement team, that is what helped me to determine, okay, now I want to go back to school because I want to change my career path. But I would say that it's up to you. Some people know that they know exactly what they want to do. And if I had gone to school straight from undergrad to graduate school, I would have gotten probably a master's in chemical engineering and been in a lab somewhere, which doesn't fit my personality, but I wouldn't have learned that without having a career experience first. I'm an extrovert. I like to talk to people, and it would have been fun to be in a lab, but I would have been pretty lonely. And, you know, I'm a communicator now, and I know that it's right for me because I had those experiences where I got an opportunity to speak to people in the PR and marketing teams through my science background. So I would say it really just depends on the person. I think you'll find your way either way. But for me, I needed to go to work first and find out what I liked and what I didn't like before making a decision about what to get a further education in.
Yeah. I would add to that, yeah, I think especially if you're attracted to anything in the service industry, the nature of these services changes so dramatically these days, given how technology is impacting it, given just a whole different host of things. So I think if you're going to go to work early on and be really flexible, always look for those learning opportunities you can gain, informal and formal. And then if you do decide to go back for an advanced degree, I mean, wait a little while, try a few things on before you commit, because again, that's a fairly extensive and expensive endeavor still, right? So you have to figure out where does it really fit in and how. But I think also organizations now are investing so much in the learning and development of their current employees' skills, like how do you continually involve our employee base skill set, that there's a lot of opportunities to gain extra expertise while working.
Right.
Just want to offer a little bit of a different perspective. I agree with what both Regina and Carmela have shared, and that's typically the advice that I share for like 9 out of 10 people that I talk to who ask me that question. I myself was someone who continued immediately after college. And the reason being was because I graduated in 08-09 from college when the economy tanked and there were very few jobs available, especially at the entry level. And so for me, I thought, let me, build my experience up and do an internship so that will allow me to have a foot into the door that much more, and kind of continue to build my resume during this time for work experience while I'm pursuing my master's degree, and use this time as, for me to really focus on my education, since I knew it was something that I wanted to do. I knew pretty early on in my career and in college that HR was my career path. I'm one of the few people that didn't fall into it, I think. And so based on that and just taking that time and just saying I'm just going to use this time to invest in myself, I think it did ultimately pay it forward for me, in that when I was, looking for a full-time job, and when the market did open up, I think that it put me that much further ahead as compared to maybe other candidates who graduated around the same year I did, but who maybe, tried to take a different path or went straight to an HR assistant kind of job.
Right.
So I would say that's just the only nuance, but I do think that 9 times out of 10, I typically share Carmela and Regina's advice.
Okay. So our topic is the X factor, right? We know just from our own experiences that, what is the saying, that luck is opportunity meets preparation, right? So I would say that when people look at our careers, they look at our bios, they look at the history of our careers, they see all of this. I know this happens to me periodically where someone says, oh, I read your bio, I've seen where you're from, how did you do this? And I would love to get on a panel and say, well, I just snapped my fingers and that was it. But I know that it takes, it took a specific amount of work, effort, but also a mix of ingredients that made me that ideal candidate. I mean, you're talking about competition at the end of the day. So what makes the ideal candidate? What is the ingredient? What is that X factor that really makes a candidate the one? And I'll start with Regina on this one, because you do this on a global scale. I mean, you literally have traveled the world to find the diamond in the rough,
Right.
Quoting from Aladdin. So how do you find that diamond in the rough?
Well,
in Thailand.
there's a few things. I mean, it really depends on what the company is looking for and what that role calls for. But if we focus specifically on the communications field right now, right, I would say the 100% most important factor is you better be a storyteller in your interviews. If you cannot tell your own story, how you got to this point right now and why this job is the one that you're most interested in, I don't know what you're doing in this field. Basic end of story for me. I mean, you could be, some people say, well, I'm just at the beginning of my career. I don't really have that many details yet, but there's gotta be something driving you to pursue these opportunities. So I wanna hear you connect the dots, whether it was an academic experience, an internship experience, a volunteer experience that got you interested, and then connecting why this particular organization and this particular role will help you deepen, expand, or contribute to whatever that vision or mission is, right? You have to be able to contribute, at least be able to talk about that in an interview setting.
Right. What do you think, Danielle? What do you, because I know Regina's absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the things as a professor, I'm always saying, if you don't tell your own story, no, someone else is either going to tell it for you or it's not going to be told.
Right. I think I totally agree with that. And I would also say that it has a lot to do with, I think, the way that you come across. And I think, what people say about first impressions is very true. You only have one chance to make a good first impression. And I do think I've hired people who had less experience, but who had the right attitude, that were prepared in the interview and did research on the company and that, or went above and beyond in the interview process and maybe like put a deck together about themselves, which is something that someone did for me, you know, once. And I just really felt like, you know, they were going to go that extra mile, and I'm willing to train that person versus maybe have someone on the team who maybe, you know, knows everything already and can jump right in, but maybe doesn't have, you know, the best attitude or isn't going to mesh well with the other team members. So I think for me, just, you know, showing that positive self-starter attitude is something that could really, really take you a long way and can also make up for some experience that you might be lacking as well.
That's good information. That's really good stuff. What do you got for us, Carmela?
No, I think that what Danielle said, you hit the nail on the head. I want to know, I think cover letters are something that the folks are considering a lost art, but I think it's really important. We read cover letters. We want to know why you think you're specifically good for this job. And just demonstrating a curiosity, having done your research and asking informed questions, showing that, you know, you really are interested in this particular position. I would also say the other thing is being personable, just being someone who is, you know, comfortable with being yourself. You come across as authentic and confident. So, you know, I know it sounds easier said than done because you know, interviews can be a nerve-wracking thing, especially when you're a graduating student and you're interviewing with multiple companies. But just coming in and having an attention to detail, asking questions that demonstrate to me that you've done your research and you've looked at the position in detail, you understand what the responsibilities are, and then you can articulate how those responsibilities fit your skill set. And it doesn't have to be in a job setting. And I would agree completely with Danielle that I would take a person who doesn't necessarily have as much experience if they can demonstrate to me that they're coachable by being curious and having really done research on the position and on the company.
Thank you. I think I think all of your feedback is a great mix, and it actually inspires another question, which is, you know, we talk about diversity and inclusion, or rather we haven't talked about diversity and inclusion, and perhaps we should, and not just from a personal standpoint because of what I look like, but we just happen to be here on this call. We happen to be all women, at least from a panel perspective. But, you know, whether you're male, female, whether you're a person of color, whether or not you are tall or short or what have you, how important is your diversity to getting the role that you want? I mean, is that you know, some people say it's a detraction. And as the former chief diversity officer, I'm going to say it's not, but, you know, I'm a little biased there. But how much should we either play up or play down our uniqueness in order to get a role? And I know it's maybe a controversial question, but I'd rather ask it and have a very frank conversation here than not. I mean, we're talking things like age, accent, geographical location, even just the way that you look. Is there something that you can add and share that would help our audience?
I'll start on this one. I would say, so in my daily work, I'll give a little bit of background. I talk to agency leaders and CCOs about their diversity strategies. And increasingly leaders are really emphasizing the fact that they want to improve their diversity in their companies. And so I would say it's for two reasons. One, because either they've run into a problem that's indicative of their diversity challenge, or two, that they are just really up on their research, they're progressive, they want to have a company that has all of the best talent, regardless of what you look like, who you worship, etc. They're just looking to be a cream of the crop company who at the end of the day is bringing in dollars, and they want a diverse team with diverse perspectives. So I would say play up your and sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes it's inherent. It's something that, you know, people are going to know when you walk in the room or when you open your mouth that you're a diverse candidate. But for any candidate, you know, there are things that are unique about you that you want to bring to the team, and to be able to play up those things or know those things about yourself that make you unique and uniquely qualified. I think that's helpful in an interview, and it's helpful to be self-aware of this is what I bring different than other candidates, because it is a competition. There's likely going to be 5 or 10 other people, depending on what position you're applying for, who are also applying. And so you have to be able to tell that part of your story about why you're uniquely qualified, and being from a diverse background, or being a veteran who has military experience, or being a mom who can multitask. I mean, you can't imagine the amount of value you bring just from being diverse in some way. And I would say play it up and use it to your advantage.
I agree. I mean, I think no matter what the situation, you have to show up as your whole self in any interview situation, because I mean, there's no other way to interview. It's you're spending a significant amount of your time in this job. You have to be authentic to yourself for you to do really well. I think the other way to look at it too is that if you really want to be savvy about it, you can always tie it to wherever the potential opportunity lies. If this employer has an employee base that looks pretty homogenous, they're probably looking at all the same places for the same market opportunities. You having a different background, maybe you speak a different language, you grew up in a few different countries, you know, you have a different lens that you filter things through. You might be able to identify opportunities no one's even thought of in that setting, because they're all coming from fairly the same place, right? So think about it that way too. Like, that's happening all the time, as although it doesn't feel like it right now because we're all so isolated. When, I mean, a lot of our organizations are operating at a much more global scale than they ever have before. So being somebody who can connect and bridge between those different local cultural differences, language differences, that point of view, I mean, it makes you stronger as a candidate overall.
Agree.
Yeah, and I would also say too, I would even make a connection between the product and the business and your diversity as well, and your unique point of view. You know, if you are interviewing for, and I'm totally throwing this out of the air. You're interviewing for, you know, a consumer PR job on an auto account. You know, I used to work at an auto company, and you know, those environments typically tend to be heavily male skewed. And obviously this is a generalization, but using this for example's sake. However, you know, the people who are really buying the product, the majority skew female. And so when you're thinking about diversity from the business rationale perspective and trying to speak to the audience that has the purchasing power, having that kind of female representation is going to be so powerful, right? And making sure that you're speaking to your audience in the right way. And there's no other way that you could, you know, do this more effectively or have more of an impact on this than in the PR and communications field, right? Like, that's what your guys' role is as communications experts. So I think for me, I think making that connection, especially given the field that we're in, is so powerful. And I feel like could really be a secret weapon, you know, as part of your interview process, and be thoughtful about it. It also is an opportunity for you to shine and show that you did research on, you know, whatever the account is, whatever the product is that you're working on. So I would also make that connection as well.
Oh, that's great. We have Caitlin, who's one of our keynote panelists. She's joining us, and I'm going to ask Caitlin to chime in on this question and also add her feedback and thoughts going forward. Caitlin, what would you or how would you respond to the question on the floor?
I mean, I definitely agree. I think it's important to highlight your diverse moments, I mean, your experience and your cultural background. At the end of the day, I think most agencies especially, and I feel like most brands that are forward thinking, are really looking to hire a person. You know, many people are of the mindset now that we can teach anyone a job. We can teach you almost anything, but we can't change who you are, and we don't want to. We want to hire you for a specific reason. And your diverse background is part of that conversation. So don't forget that at the end of the day, a human is hiring you, not a bot or not a series of them. We really want you to bring your personality to the table. Company culture is really important. Team culture is really important. I know, especially at Fleischmann, when we're looking to add someone to the team, we make sure that we all feel really good about who they are and that we know that they can bring something extra that we're missing. We call out our flaws and we want to make sure that we're creating a balanced experience, and that's one of the ways we do it. So please highlight it, shout it from the rooftops, honestly. And for all you know, that person might not seem like they have a shared background experience, but maybe they do, and that creates an even deeper connection, which is awesome. And it really helps people come together and do the best work.
Great. Great, thank you. Now we have a question. Our audience is ready and fired up. We have a question. With nonlinear career paths, was there a time frame that each of you had when in the roles that were not going to be what you wanted to do for a career? And Carmela, the specific question was, what skill or experience did you cultivate in engineering that most prepared you for your current role? So the first question to all the panelists, with non-linear career paths, was there a time frame that each of you had when in the roles that were not going to be what you wanted to do for a career? I'm sorry, I do know how to read, just so you know.
I'll start since there's a two-part question, and the second part is for me. But as far as a nonlinear career path, yes, I definitely took roles that I knew weren't going to be forever roles, especially early in your career. You're going to take roles that are more so learning roles where you're getting to know a different side of the business. And that's important. I think it's important to be able to, one, recognize that, and two, to take those roles, not to say no to them, because there's always something you can learn from a role that you don't plan to be in for the rest of your career, or even a function you don't plan to be in for the rest of your career. And then to the second part of the question, what skill did I cultivate in engineering that most prepared me for my current role? I would say attention to detail. In engineering, especially in the pharmaceutical world, you're engineering things that are going to go into people's bodies, or in the beauty world, onto people's bodies. And it's important to have precision calculations, attention to detail, and then be able to effectively communicate that to your stakeholders, what those important details are and why they're important. And so that has translated for me 100%. I mean, in communications, I think Caitlin said it in the opening keynote, that, that attention, don't send me an email with a typo in it. That precision and that attention to detail, that's something that I pulled from engineering. That's really important in communications, especially if your target audience's first impression of you is a website or an email, something visual, and it's not perfect. And not that you should be always chasing perfection, but a little bit you should be chasing perfection, because you're doing client work. These are billable hours. Someone is paying you for this, and it should be your best work.
I think back to the first part of that question, a person who's looking at people's backgrounds all day long, there is a fine line though between trying to gain diverse experiences and then having just a really jumpy resume. So you have to figure out, were you in a place long enough that you could actually have a learning lesson, a takeaway that adds to your overall skill set, rather than, well, I just got really bored. So, and I mean, people have said that to me in interviews, too honest almost. But if you can't come away with some kind of learning skill, something that you've picked up in that role, and then decided, okay, I didn't really want to focus in that direction of the field, I wanted to pivot this way, that's fine. But make sure there's a cohesive and thoughtful story between why those jumps happened when they happened.
Yeah. I would also say, for me, I started in recruitment, and I love recruitment. It's still my, very much my bread and butter to this day. And every role I've had has always involved recruitment to some extent. And I never thought about being an HR person. I always thought, I want to do kind of the happy side of HR and, and being able to do something that's so impactful to the business.
You said recruitment is the happy side of HR.
That was always how I've versus like the more layoff and difficult conversation side of
marriage.
I never thought that I would want to kind of do what what is now the majority of my time now, spent doing for a living. But it ended up being something that kind of came my way just organically. And the people that I was hiring, so the company, they knew me because I was their recruiter. I was, the face of their onboarding and the person they went to with any questions. And so it was a natural extension for them to come to me with, their concerns or just to talk to someone that they could trust.
Right.
And so it's something that it really just evolved in that way. And at first I was kind of like, oh, how do I feel about this? I'm not, I'm not sure this is, I'm not sure about this, but that kind of perception too, the more I got into it, it really faded away. And that like, it's so much more than like happy or sad. Like it's very not like a binary field. And it's also, one cannot exist without the other. Right. It's a blending of the two, and having, and being a good recruiter makes you a better HR person, and being a good HR person makes you a better recruiter. And so for me, I think, if I had written it off, when it first started to come my way, my career would have been totally different. So I think, especially early on in your career, when people give you, exposure to different things that even if you feel like, oh, that's not me, or or that doesn't feel right, or, don't judge something like at face value, like try it. I think you don't really know what something is like until you actually try it. Sure. and try it for yourself. And you'll find out things about yourself too, that you didn't even know about, and some strengths that you had that you didn't even realize you had, which is something that, I've really found out about myself over the past 10 years. So sure. I would definitely say that, for sure. So just be open-minded.
Caitlin, do you want to add anything to the discussion?
I think that they've pretty much summed it up. I am one of those people who has a relatively linear experience and have always wanted to, and have always worked in some form of communications. So it's a little bit different, but I would really encourage everyone, I know I talked about this earlier, to try it. You will never regret trying something, in my opinion. So true. Take it for a spin.
Especially while you're young, when the world is far more forgiving of you when you make mistakes, or, I always say, I'm up there, but I always say that in your 20s are for making mistakes, your 30s are for learning from them, your 40s are for sort of guiding your sails toward, your true north, your true direction, and your 50s are for not caring.
I really love that.
So that's where I am right now. I'm not, but you won't tell anyone. Don't say anything. Okay, we have another question. We have a question from Zoe. She says, I'm a foreigner who wants to find jobs in the communication field. Do you think the language barrier is the biggest challenge for me? And what other challenges do I have during the competition, sort of to gain a position? And I will say this, I know Zoe's also a former student of mine, and I do know that I have a very large contingent of international students. And that's one of the biggest questions they have for me, which is, how do I position myself? I'm great on my resume, like everything is there, because a lot of times they come to me and it's like, hey, what is this, what does my resume look like? And I'll switch off the professor hat to my HR hat and say, okay, the resume is good, etc. But they're facing the challenge of, I have an accent, it's not agnostic. How can I get past the first interview with just my accent so that the person sees me for who I am? You know, somebody share any thoughts, any ideas?
I'll take that one first because I dealt with pretty international populations. I mean, in the US right now, it's not the communications piece that's going to be the challenge for entry-level communications. It's if you're an international student that will require any kind of sponsorship, getting beyond, you know, if you're approaching an H-1B situation where you need to be sponsored for that, actually being successful in that visa transfer is practically impossible at a junior level stage. Just because, again, you know, those H-1Bs are really being saved for very senior level, very specialized skill sets that are key hires, like management roles within organizations.
And
so that's one.
We're also talking about in this particular environment as well, right? We're not necessarily talking about the history, but just in this particular environment.
Yes.
I think it's important to punctuate.
I mean, I've dealt with so many entry-level candidates who were, unfortunately, they did everything right, were able to get the jobs, but then couldn't stay at the companies because there was just no way that the company could convert them in a way that they could employ them in a legal way. So it's really heartbreaking. So, I mean, I think there's a few things. You look at more multinational companies that might have rotational type programs that are open to much more global entry level workforce, right? They're looking to kind of bring people who are a little bit more mobile, perhaps. If you can add a technical skill set that might differentiate you, you know, programming plus a communications background will never hurt anybody. But I'm just saying that the logistically, I mean, I've met very few HR people who were like, oh, we can get around the visa issues right now in this current climate. So,
yeah, it's really, I second that. It's really tough right now. Even for like senior intercompany hires, everything is just so highly scrutinized right now. And especially at the entry level, and especially if it's not a super technical role, AKA like developer, you know, it's very challenging. So, you know, my advice, I think Regina's advice on the multinational companies, I think is huge. My advice would also be upfront in your interview process. I've interviewed candidates in the past that have said, oh yeah, you know, I'm eligible to work in the US, but like didn't mention that there was an asterisk, you know, there that like, oh, you know, I have this OPT time or whatever. So I think be upfront about it, so that you're being, you know, appreciative of that person's time and also of your own time, because you don't want to get so far down the path with somebody and then you find out in the 11th hour that you can't be hired. Now it's a waste of your time that you could have otherwise spent maybe at a job that could have actually, you know, hired you in the longer term. And then it's also not kind of burning a bridge with, you know, a future potential employer as well. So that would just be my advice too, and just be upfront about it and be like, hey, do you sponsor? What's your policy on that? And if they don't really give you, you know, yes, we could work with you, then move on and keep trucking and try to find a place that, you know, could try to work with you there.
Good stuff.
I would also just quickly add, I would just encourage you to still try. I know that I agree with Regina on the multinational companies front. There have been scenarios in which I've hired junior members of the team that required visa sponsorship specifically because our client had a natural tie to them. For example, we worked with Tourism Australia, and at one point we needed to hire someone who was extremely familiar with the market, and we hired someone who came over from Australia and needed a specific type of visa, obviously not as complicated. We've done the same thing from Korea because we have certain set of clients that require a language need and also a cultural need that we need to fill. They are very rare. It is super difficult, especially on the junior level, but as long as you're trying strategically and really thinking about how you can fit into a company and their client set and what they need, I feel like you have an opportunity to increase your chances now and later, because there's a chance that they might come back to you, or they might say, hey, can we actually have you work in a different country in the beginning, and we want to transition you over later because the need is there and that's a natural fit for us. I mean, there's a million things that could happen, but try to be smart about it when you do.
I think that's good feedback. Okay, so we have two questions here. Well, actually it's a two-parter, so it's for Danielle and Caitlin specifically. You have both touched on this from a high level, but in percentages, what number would you assign to the importance of mastering corporate culture versus skills, experience versus education?
That's a really good question. I think it depends a little bit on the position and the level of the position. But I'm going to tailor this to more junior level roles, specifically since that's who the majority of our audience is. But I would say, to me, culture is probably, number one. So I would probably say like between 50 and 60% there. To me, and this is the way that we're trying to do a mindset shift a little bit at Fleischmann, is that, our junior staff up to senior account executives should really be kind of seen as generalists. Meaning, although maybe you feel a strong affinity towards healthcare or tech or consumer PR or whatever, that, you have the ability and to move around and to try different things and to gain more holistic experience, which I think is really important, before you kind of get onto that linear career path and just say like, oh, one day I'm a VP of healthcare and I don't like this at all, kind of a thing. And this doesn't feel good. So, and you're not expected to have all those answers, with 1 year of experience or less. So I think for me, it's the culture, it's number one. I would say 50 to 60%. Skill set is honestly probably 20%, because we're not really, especially for like our super entry level, people, it's very basic, I think, kind of communications skills that we're, expecting. It's more like, are you teachable? And are you willing to learn? And are you willing to roll up your sleeves and do what it takes to kind of help the team be more productive? So 50 to 60, plus 20 is 70 to 80%. And then I forgot what the other, the other element was that they asked about, but I would say.
Stephanie did say earlier that, we have to do math in our field. So.
I know, I'm in HR though, so
I think we like to build ranges, so we don't have to do real math.
Of course.
I'll let Caitlin answer for the remaining percentage.
It's funny that, and I love this question because I was actually having this conversation with our team the other day. We had been doing some candidate interviews for entry-level roles, and we were all spitballing on what we liked about these people, what we felt wasn't right. And someone said, well, I felt about 50% on this person's personality, which is fine. And I thought about it for a minute and I was like, no, actually, we should feel 100% about their personality. Like everything else is a bonus. Like we can teach them to do their jobs. We can make sure that they have the right experience. But if we're not feeling good about the personality that they're bringing to the table, to our clients, to our company culture, to our everyday experience, then they're not necessarily the right fit for us. So I would say that culture fit and personality to me is 100%, and everything else is a bonus. The education and experience, which I think were the last two that were being asked about, to me, it's the same thing. Your education is part of your experience. I don't differentiate the two when we're looking at a resume. But I would say that personality is 100. Experience, if we can go over 100, is an added bonus of probably 20%. And then skills, I can teach you that. That's my job. So we can work from there. But if the personality is not a right corporate culture team fit, then we're not the right fit for you either. So you have to make sure that it works both ways.
Before I move on to the next question, when we talk about culture fit, I teach other courses, and one of those courses happens to be organizational behavior. And I hear the language around culture fit. And Regina, you and I have had these sidebar conversations about that and how that seems to be code these days for, you know, and Carmela's shaking her head because we've also talked about culture fit exhaustively, which are these sidebar conversations in which we're talking about even our own experiences. It seems to me today that culture fit, and I'm putting these in air quotes for those of you who could see me, right? Culture fit seems to be the way to exclude particular audiences without discriminating openly. And this is not a diversity and inclusion conversation in and of itself, but, you know, for whatever reason, you know, I happen to be a little thicker than maybe a size 2. So you're not the right culture fit for me. You know, you know, if I'm in PR fashion and everyone's a size 0, but I happen to be a size not 0. You know, so you're not the right culture fit. So how do you get around that code talk around culture fit, meaning exclusion? And Regina, I'll start with you because you're shaking your head and you know what we're talking about.
I mean, I think you read my mind that I was like, there should be an additional question to the culture fit criteria. I think I worked with a lot of companies who had a lot of young hiring managers, you know, people who were kind of putting their teams together for the first time. And one thing I always tried to educate them on early on in the process is that, yes, culture fit is important, fit with the current organization or clients. But I think, again, in a service industry, all service industries are dealing with so much more uncertainty, diversity in general, like how to do business, how to win business, how to keep your clients, all this stuff. You have to be prepared for a lot of different things. So I think you can only do that by continuing to hire people who are continuing to add to whatever your culture is. Yeah. So I think you add a screening question throughout. What's the additive value that this person brings to us, right? They've passed all the skills tests. We think we really like them, but on top of that, like I'd rather take somebody who was 80% culture fit, but also happens to have this amazing experience that we might need because we just won this piece of business that happens to be in the market that they lived in for a summer because their dad was in the UN. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying? Like, be prepared. No, like, where would that fit in? Is that valuable? Right. Like, I teach at Columbia, the School of International Public Affairs. The range of students that I've met who are like in their early 20s and they're like, I've already worked in 4 different countries. I mean,
so just to qualify, Regina's met my 2 children, and my children are 25 and 23. And between the 2 of them, they've traveled to 4 continents and have either lived or traveled to long-term to 20 countries between the 2 of them. Wow. And they speak 5 languages between the 2 of them. So yeah, I mean, like at 25, I was a mom. That was my claim to fame. Yeah. Like they've already traveled the world. So to your point.
Yeah, you have to build interview processes that allow for that type of difference and probe for it, like ask. You know what I mean? Like, is there something that you've done that kind of sets you apart in a way that could be helpful to us in the global climate that we work in?
So then I'm going to ping this to Carmela, switch it. So Regina's talking about it from sort of that hiring perspective. So switch it as a candidate. How do you get around that culture fit conversation? And then I'm going to kick it back to the audience because they're giving me like evil eyes. I can feel them.
No, actually, you read my mind because I was also thinking about it from a candidate perspective. A lot of times culture fit is not something that is something you can articulate. It's something you feel as, you can ask the questions about, tell me about your company and what is the culture like here at your company, and get an understanding of it. And a lot of times, definitely culture fit is code for how to exclude someone. But I think most times in companies that have good intentions, culture fit is your personality one that fits this? Is your character or your traits? Are you a hard worker? Are you easy to talk to? And things like that. Things that are more softer skills as opposed to your your hard technical skills from a communication standpoint. But if you are in a position where you feel culture fit is something exclusionary, it's hopefully something that you found in your, maybe you looked on Glassdoor and saw some reviews of this company. Again, it goes back to doing your research and understanding, are you applying for a company where you've heard the culture? Like, this goes back to networking as well, talking to people, alumni from your program who are either at that company, who might be able to relate to you because they're either close in age or you have some other identifier, they're your mentor. Culture fit it can be exclusionary, but you can find ways around that. And I would say in your interviews, even if they're informational interviews, ask about, what is the company culture like? What is a day like in this company? How many young professionals are looking to work for this company? Those are the type of things that you do in your research before you get to the interview, and ask a pointed question at the interview. Again, playing up your uniqueness and how you can add to the company's culture.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Okay, so I am going to call on, is it Zir?
It's Zere.
Zere, nice to meet you, Zere. Would you mind asking your question to our panelists, please?
I want to put on the video so you can see how I look.
Yes, please.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you. I texted my message here, but I was called on to say everything by myself. I'm doing my grad degree right now at NYU. I'm doing the degree in digital marketing because we're changing the times, everything moves to digital. I have 8 years experience in multinational companies. Most of them are American. 2 of them are American. One is from Sweden. And I started my career from the department assistant, and my last job was the strategy manager of the department. So right now I'm graduating on May 2020, and I started my job hunt on October 2019, like half year ago. And I was applying to all the jobs that fitted my career right now. But after getting all the regrets, I was not speaking to people. I didn't have any interviews. I was just applying online. And I was keeping getting all that refusals. And I was thinking, like, maybe I'm not the local, maybe I don't know the market, maybe like I have maybe some levels or some knowledge that I have to learn. And I started to apply for the entry positions now, like the assistant of the department or the internship, but I still keep getting all that refusals from the employers, even if it's like the online application, not the interview process. And I don't know why this is happening, and I wanted to know your feedback about that. Bless you. And I wanted to know your feedback about that, like if it's the crisis, but crisis happened like 1 month ago, and I was applying starting from February or even January. And maybe you can help me with this question. Like I have my CV, I took it to Wasserman Center, bless you again, which said that it's like, it's good right now. I've practiced my interviews with different people, and my last conversation with my manager, who's now the big boss in Russia, I've asked her to help from her side. Maybe she can write to American office and help me out with the interview process. Maybe HR can see me in this way, not just giving the refusals. So I wanted to know your feedback, like what should I do? Should I keep looking for the job, or better to go to my country and like to find the job in 5 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll start with this one. I would say that, I would say 2 things. It could be the sponsorship issue here. That could be one of the key items. And if not, I mean, I would ask for informational interviews. Go to, there's plenty of events that NYU has where you can network with hiring managers or with people who are not necessarily hiring managers, but are in the field that you want to be in.
Carmela, sorry. I don't know if it's
Zeta, can you, I was going to say, Zeta, can you mute your microphone? Thank you. I was just sending you a message. Thank you. Okay, try it again, Carmela. I apologize.
Okay, can you hear me? Hopefully you can hear me better now.
Okay, no. What's happening? Okay, can you hear me all fine?
Yes.
Okay. let's try this again.
Maybe Carmela, if you go on mute and then go off mute for
I
a
was
second,
gonna say,
maybe
try
something with
that.
the mic.
Try that.
Okay, is this better?
No, I don't know why. I don't know what's happening. Okay.
I'll let someone else answer this one.
Oh.
Okay.
I could
Danielle.
take it. Yeah, sure. I could take it. So I think, and it sounded like what Carmela was saying was that, you know, it sounds as though perhaps visa sponsorship could be a big hurdle here, which just stinks, you know. And I think what's important though, and I'm sharing this with you as also an executive coach myself, but I think it's important that you don't internalize this the rejections, you know, and because I see your word rejections in the text message in the message that you sent us. I think unfortunately in the climate that we're in, it is so challenging for visas, even for people who are experienced. I'm working on one now, and it's from someone in Canada, and it's a nightmare. It really is a nightmare. And so know that like it is not personal to you, and you have skills and abilities that are unbelievable and that are unique to you. And so I share that first of all, because if we had the ability, you know, for us as employers to hire international students, we would do it in a heartbeat. You know, talent is so scarce right now. There's really seriously a war for talent. And so trust me, we want to, because it's very challenging to find top talent. And so I think, just know that, you know, because I saw the word rejection. I just wanted you to know that, like, try not to internalize that. Know that it's probably, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's probably just the visa situation. And I think also some recruiters have been trained, unfortunately, like if they see, you know, someone who had, you know, their first education in another country or had a lot of work experience in another country, they're trained that this person probably needs a visa and I probably can't hire them, so I'm just going to reject them, which is hard, you know, which is not great. But unfortunately, there are some recruiters out there who don't have some of the best screening processes. So I think, you know, for you, I think, you know, I would keep trying. I think obviously now with COVID-19, there's an additional layer of complexity that's being added to your search, unfortunately, you know, and it's a global situation. But I would say, you know, keep trying, be upfront in the process, kind of like what I mentioned before, and see if there's a possibility there. I would also say, you know, in talking to your last manager, like if there's a way for them to position this like a transfer in hiring you here, or maybe it's something where, you know, you have to go back there and work there for 6 months before you can come back to the US, if that's what you really want, and they can put you on an L1 visa, which is a lot, which is typically it's a little, you know, it's easier to get, you know, that could be an option as well. So those would be my 2 things. And also, you know, really, I can't stress enough, really how challenging the immigration situation and sponsorship situation has gotten in the US, unfortunately. So, you know, just wanted to share that with you, and I hope that helps.
One thing I'd like to add to that is that you might not also, don't just use the typical job posting channels to apply. I think Carmela was starting to say, network your way into places. Use the NYU network. You said you're from Russia. Find the Russians in the NYU alumni network and say, hey, is my language background, is my work experience there helpful to your company? How did you end up at this place? Do you have any tips for me to get my foot in the door? And I would start from there and be a little bit more creative. Like, you know, if you see a job posting that you like beyond applying online, is there somebody that you know with your network that could actually introduce you to the hiring manager? Get your resume in front of a real human being instead of, half those rejections are automated by computer systems.
Right. I started to that.
You know, so don't count that. If there's an opportunity that's really interesting to you, take the extra step. Who do I know? I mean, you'd be surprised how many people will be willing to help you just because you said, hey, I'm an NYU alum and I've also applied for this job. Could you help me get to HR? Like, you just never know who's going to say yes to you. So
Right,
I would try a little bit more legwork and not just rely 100% on the online application.
Great. I'm going to share this with Carmela, and then I'm going to move on to Kimberly. Carmela says, sorry for my technical difficulties. Zira, your informational interviews are really helpful to just get feedback on your interview skills without the intention of landing a role. It also allows organizations to keep you in mind in the future when they're hiring. Networking at events to get informational interview opportunities is even also a helpful way to informally introduce yourself and get in front of faces and people. So thank you all. I'm going to call on Kimberly Logan next. She has a great question. Hi, Kimberly, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I hope everyone can hear me. This is a great forum, and I am learning so much, and I do appreciate the time each of you has taken to put this event on. I had read an article a while back that indicated that men apply for a job if they meet 50% of the criteria laid out on a job description, and women were much more hesitant to do that and would only apply if they met, say, 85 or 95% of the requirements on a job description. Like, how closely does each of you evaluate a candidate based on a job description? Do you, so I guess my question is two parts. Number one, is that what you find? You receive resumes from men whose backgrounds don't closely match your job descriptions, number one. And number two, like when you're considering a candidate, like in percentages, like how closely,
Oh, she froze. Okay, so that was, I think we have a good foundation. We'll wait till she checks back in, but would anyone like to share the first part? Oh, Kimberly, you're back. Okay, so you froze in that last part.
oh, sorry. I was wondering, like, when considering a candidate, like how closely must their background match your job description before you'll consider extending an interview?
Great question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone, feel free to jump on in.
I'll take it. I've worked in, most of my background has been working in predominantly male-dominated company cultures and environments. So I've worked in tobacco, alcohol, and cars, one after another. So I'm very happy to be in a more equal playing field, more equal environment, more diverse environment, going into PR and communications. But I think that I haven't truly done a deep dive to really figure that out. However, I do believe anecdotally that could be the case. I do think also, I'll share this, that for some positions that are open that maybe people haven't applied to, if I do a quick search based off of people's, keywords in their resumes or whatnot in my applicant tracking system, a lot of times I'll find candidates that are really great, but just didn't apply for whatever reason, or maybe it was like a month ago, or, but it was still recent and they just didn't apply for whatever reason. And so, I do think that, for me, I try not to just look at the job description. I also try to think about my hiring manager and like what is going to be something, because at the end of the day, recruiters trying to keep their hiring manager happy. So I try to think about my hiring manager and what are they going to be looking for, and make sure that I'm screening through things the right way. But I do think, something that I've done in the past as it relates to job descriptions is being really thoughtful about the language that's being used in your job description. As it relates to unconscious bias. So like if you have a lot of words in your job description that are very like masculine, hard-hitting words, that could turn off a female applicant. And because you might say like, oh, this seems like, I can't do this. Or it's like, oh, I'm looking for an aggressive team player, that doesn't get me excited as a female applicant to apply for that job personally, So I think like for me, that's also something that, that I also have been really thoughtful of and trying to teach my hiring managers, like really trying to soften language, make it more gender neutral and more inclusive of everybody. But I do think, I agree with you. I think that's a really interesting statistic. And I think that, anecdotally, I think it probably is, there's some accuracy probably there. And so I think don't be afraid. And I would also say this, and it depends on where you're at in your search. But if you think something is interesting to you and maybe it's a quick apply and it's not going to take a huge amount of your time to apply to a role, like just apply. Like the worst thing that's going to happen to you, and especially now when we're all in isolation, like, you know, and I like, what else are you doing right now? You know, like if it takes 10 minutes, just apply and like see what the worst thing that happens. You get an automated message that says, you know, no, but at least you tried, and you never know where it could get you. You know, I found this role because my last company was acquired. I was running all over the place. I didn't even have time to think about what my next job was going to be, and I knew that my role was being eliminated. I need to find a new job, but there was a LinkedIn easy apply button for my job, and so I was like, great, I can do this in 2 seconds, and that was honestly the big reason why, you know, I ended up applying for it. And then when I talked to the people, it was, you know, my entryway into presenting my skill set and whatnot and learning about them. So I think, you know, just apply. Like worst case scenario, even if you think it's not a perfect match, what's the worst that can happen? Right. You know?
I would also like to note that I would challenge everyone to reconsider how they think about themselves on their resume. Even if you have, let's say, 50% that meets a role, it's not that the other 50% that you have on your resume isn't applicable. It's different. So when Danielle's team throws a resume across our desks and we're taking a look at it, I think, okay, well, great. They do these things we already need them to do. Okay, great, awesome. That's good to know. But, oh, they bring these other 10 skill sets that we haven't had before, and I can use them in this way, which they might not have known because they don't know that we work on a new project or that we're looking to build out a different division, something of that nature. So I think one of the things that comes up often is men are very confident and they think, oh, I'm great all around. This other 50% is awesome and we should too. It's an added value. Don't think of it as a detractor.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me, or is it still?
Yay! She's back.
So I just wanted to weigh in on this a little bit, having come from the engineering field where it was, there were often times where I was the only female on a team. And I would say, while it is anecdotal, yes, it seems, especially in the STEM fields, to be statistically true. And having heard that, that feedback early on in my career, I made it a point to apply to jobs that I could envision myself doing, but maybe I only had 50% of the preferred skills or the required skills. So I mentioned earlier when Shawnice asked us to introduce ourselves with 3 words, representing our career journey, risky was mine. And that was because I always applied to roles where I knew I had enough skills to get me there, but that half of them would be would have to be learned on the job or would require like extreme research. And it was because I frequently heard that women don't apply to roles that men would apply to if their resumes were exactly the same. And so I also would encourage you to take a role that you feel passionate about, because again, those things that are transferable or that are new skills you can bring will fill out that last 50%.
Thank you.
Regina, I know that you have to hop off on and get to another call because she is, of course, because she's global, she literally is on the phone 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? And I can't tell you how many times we've texted, emailed, or chatted each other at some ungodly hour on any hemisphere at any time. But would you like to say a few words before jumping off, and then I'll have Alexandra ask her last question.
I mean, I thought all the discussion was really, really great, and I'd love it if anyone wanted to stay in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn, Regina Angelis. I would love to stay in touch for future questions and opportunities, and any of the alumni or students who are on. I love getting in contact with young talent and seeing how I can help you in your job searches. So good luck to everybody. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you, Regina.
Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Okay.
Tango soon, okay?
Okay, bye.
Bye. Alexandra, you are up next. I know that you had a burning question, and I don't dare log off without making sure you ask
Thank you
ask
so
your
much.
question.
Yes, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you to all our speakers. This is amazing panel, very inspiring. And my question is actually I think it's important to everyone because in today's situation with all the uncertainty, is the recruitment still happening in PR or is it more on pause? I'm asking that because I was in the middle of the interview process with several companies, and when the whole thing happened, it just stopped, and now nobody is replying to my messages, and I understand that people don't have time for for me right now because they have crisis mode on and all of that. But just wanted to see, do you think that we should still apply right now if there are some positions open, or should we maybe wait and see how it goes? That's the global one part of the question. And the second part is more of about what we already talked about, the diversity and accents and all of that. If the problem is not with visa, because I'm a permanent resident, so I don't have problems with that, is my accent and my diverse background, because I'm from different country as well, is it a disadvantage for me in communications field, or can I still use it as an advantage? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Yeah. So I'll say, we are still hiring for sure. I think it's hard because it's going to change day by day how this affects our business as it's affecting clients' business. But I would say, in particular, think about roles that are currently very busy. So like crisis right now is an area that is very, very busy. If there's also any niche roles that it's just hard for, there's no one internally that, we know we need to hire this person externally because there's no one internally who could take the job. I think could be, really interesting and probably will be moving forward more so than some other roles where you can have people who are more generalists. So I would say, those roles in particular are the ones where, those are really picking up. But again, it is a constantly shifting field and area. And I would say, for us, I think that your background would be super valuable. And I think it would be an asset for us to have. So send me your resume after this, but
Okay.
and we'll talk, but no, but I think, it should be, and frankly, and sorry if this is like speaking out of school, if someone is not going to want you to work there because of your background or because of your accent or whatever, I have an accent too. I found out when I moved to California that I have a strong New York accent. I didn't know that until I moved there. Then you don't want to work there anyway. You know what I mean? And know that this is a two-way dialogue and you need to feel good about where you're working too. So, just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah. And that's a very good point Danielle makes. Sometimes we think accents in terms of like country to country, international, but believe it or not, even locally, whether or not you have a Southern drawl, if you're in Texas, or whether or not you're from New York. I'm from New Jersey by way of South Carolina. So at any given point in time, if I'm angry, you'll hear me from South Carolina. If I'm happy, you'll hear New Jersey, and any other time you won't hear anything, as you can see right now. I've learned to sort of be accent agnostic, but those things come into play. It's a part of who you are, and it's not something I think that you should ever shy away from or should be shamed for. So I will say that, don't allow anyone to shame you for where you are and who you are or what you sound like, because I'm personally a fan, and I think all of us here are fans. So poo-poo on them,
I would also say be patient in this time because of what's going on in the world, and just be sensitive to what's happening, especially with some uncertainty, not just with the future of work, but with the economy. A lot of organizations are more concerned with business continuity. They may be reevaluating their strategy. And I can say this because we're in the middle of it right now, where we were literally in the middle of the hiring process, and we've got to recast our budget because we're a nonprofit organization. our events are getting canceled, and that's how we make money to pay our employees. So it would be different for a corporation, but they're still doing some business continuity evaluations, and they will get back to you if you're already in the process. But if you're seeing companies post new positions, they're still hiring. If you're checking daily on the posting sites and you're seeing new positions come up, I would apply for it. I wouldn't let that be a deterrent, that we're currently in the midst of a crisis. So, and I would just third what everybody else said, that your accent is not a detractor. It's part of the uniqueness you bring. And it's, again, agreed with Danielle, if a company is not going to hire you because of that, that is definitely a place where you don't want to work. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that said, it is 8:40. We have blown past our deadline. So I'm going to ask the very final question, which is probably the most important question of tonight altogether. What is your indulgence while we're shut in? So it's a lightning round. Okay, what are you doing that's self-indulgent while you're shut in? And then we will conclude on that. Mind you, we are all in PR, so we probably haven't had a self-indulgent moment at all. I think my indulgent moment, I'll begin. I think there is, some mint chocolate chip ice cream in my freezer that I might just get out after this. So that might be my self-indulgent moment.
Nice.
Okay, Danielle, Carmela, Caitlin, what are yours?
Mine, I'm pretty much the same. HR nowadays is also a pretty wild bride at the moment. And so I would say for me, sleep just would be really nice. I don't remember the last time I slept more than 4 or 5 hours. So this past weekend, I was able to kind of catch up a little bit. But for me, it's been pretty rough. So I would say that would be a really nice indulgence, or being able to exercise would be just really good, and get some endorphins and just feel better physically than I currently am.
For me, it's been, because we're doing video conferences now, I've been waking up earlier than I would so I can look pretty, because normally I'm just in the office and, I don't see clients every day, or I just mostly have conference calls. But now that we're kind of moving to video calls, I've kind of broken out my makeup that I don't normally wear on a regular day, because I'm going to be on a video conference in front of folks, and I can hide my background, but I can't hide my face. So that's been my indulgence.
I am in the same boat as Danielle. As you can imagine, the technology industry is going nuts. So I would have to say, though, we started on one of my practice group teams this morning 15-minute video chat where everyone gets on. There's about 15 of us just to check in for the day. And we force, I will say, one person every day, somebody different, to give us a quick little lightning chat about something that's not work related. And it has honestly changed our day. Yesterday, we each got an astrology reading from someone who's very passionate about astrology. I talked about the benefit of office and home office plants for about 6 minutes the other day. So it sounds really silly, but it's really fun things like that help you feel like you're doing something fun and different, and you're bringing a sense of normalcy to constantly being virtual. And it really just honestly sets the day off. So if you haven't done that, I highly encourage it. It's great to see people's passions come out.
Well, thank you all so much. I have had the time of my life. Who knew I could have so much fun in a virtual setting, right? But thank you all so much. Honestly, you are amazing women, and I couldn't have asked for a better panel. Ours was the best. Don't tell anyone else.
Round of applause for our host, Shawnice.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thank you, Shawnice.
Thank you. So you'll definitely hear from us again. Thank you very much for sharing your time, and we will talk to you hopefully soon. Everyone have a great self-contained evening.
Thank you. Everyone be well.
Be well.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.